Welcome. So this panel is going to touch on, or it's titled, The Puppet Masters, How the Profiteers Are Looting Education. So welcome to everyone here in person, everyone on the live stream watching us. My name is Jose Melendez. I'm the moderator for today's panel. I serve as campaign director for the Government Reform and Oversight Coalition at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. Today's discussion is going to focus on, most Texans think about education spending as dollars that go to teachers, students, the classroom. There's a system behind the scenes that really gets a lot of this money. It's a system filled with vendors, consultants, and a lot of other players who are taking those tax dollars. In fact, my good colleague and friend, Judge Shepard, came out with a report yesterday called Hijacked, How the Bond Process is Being Used Against Taxpayers, which says that the school bond debt has exceeded $236 billion in the state of Texas. That's an insane amount. The research also shows that a lot of times these profiteers, so those vendors, those architectural firms, all these players behind the scenes are spending just pennies and getting a large return on that investment because they are getting the contracts that come with these bonds. Today we're going to discuss how all this works, how the system benefits, and what are some of the solutions. But before I get into that, I want to introduce the panelists I have here on stage, starting with Chairman Bonin. So Representative Greg Bonin is chair of the House Appropriations Committee and is currently serving his 7th term as state representative for House District 24. Prior to serving as chair of the House Appropriations Committee, he served as chair of the Appropriations Subcommittee on Higher Education and Public Education, and as a member of the Insurance Committee. He's a practicing neurosurgeon and serves as the chairman of the board of the Houston Physicians Hospital. Dr. Bonin grew up in Angleton and graduated from Texas A&M University. He also attended medical school at UTMB, where he did his neurosurgery residency and served for 2 years as an assistant professor of neurosurgery. Representative Bonin and his wife, Kim, live in Friendswood and have 2 daughters. My colleague, Mandy Drogan. Mandy is one of the foremost education reform leaders in Texas. Prior to joining the Texas Public Policy Foundation, she spent nearly 8 years with the American Federation for Children, serving as state director for 3 years, and achieved significant policy advances across the state. She also played a key role in the successful passage of school choice legislation and has led impactful marketing campaigns to empower families in accessing parent-directed education funding. Mandy founded the Parental Empowerment Coalition, which played a major role in securing the nation's largest Day One education savings account program. Mandy lives in Austin with her husband, John Drogan, and their 3 children. Last but not least, Brandon Hodges. Brandon serves as the Vice President of Corporate Affairs and Integration at True Chemical Solutions in Midland, Texas. He served as the President of the Board of Trustees for Midland Independent School District, overseeing governance for 29,000 students and 3,000 employees. He now currently represents District 5 as a trustee and is also a member of the State Republican Executive Committee for Senate District 31 for the Texas Republican Party. Brandon's educational background includes degrees from Villanova University and a paralegal graduate degree from Rice University, and is currently studying at the University of Pennsylvania. He's married and a proud father to a son completing his engineering degree at the Texas Tech University. So let's get started. When we talk about these profiteers, these vendors, these consultants, we've dubbed this system the educational cartel. And I think a good way to get this conversation started is by defining what we mean by this education cartel. So I'm going to kick it over to Mandy Drogan. Mandy, tell us, what is meant when we say this educational cartel, this system at hand?
Yeah, it's a system that has been set up, for anybody that's studied political science, much like an iron triangle, where those in the leadership, oftentimes in education, I'm talking your administrators, your superintendents, along with legislators and others that serve as what we dub the profiteers, have figured out a way to steer 60 cents on the dollar out of the classroom and contribute. They are the number one contributor to the fact that we have $236 billion worth of bonds. So they have rigged the system where the money flows to them and flows away from our classrooms, away from our kids, and away from providing a high-quality education for Texans.
So just as a follow-up, we've heard of organizations like TASB, that's the Texas Association of School Boards, and a consulting firm by the name of Mukasey. How do these entities fit into this system?
Well, TASB's been around for about 75 years, and I usually don't pull up anything on my phone, but I want to show this. I was doing some research recently, and this is TASB. If you can't see, all the different colors represent over 20 entities that are being sold back to your ISD. There's over 1,200 ISDs in the state of Texas, and almost every single one of them is a part of TASB, where they're getting their energy, their health care, their board book, their buy board, all of these different services that they claim the school districts must have. But what we know is they are locking them in under the guise of this risk fund. And I just released a report with a attorney that specializes in insurance. And effectively what he has found, what he believes is that TASB's origin, the risk fund, is unconstitutional. And it is by definition extortive because they, along with TML, and we'll talk about how the Texas Municipal League, and that goes into our push to eliminate taxpayer-funded lobbying, is they've rigged the system at the legislative level. They have written out and or into code, to legal code, giving them an advantage. What is their advantage? TASB's origin, their advantage. They had the good faith and fair dealings clause eliminated for TASB Risk Fund. That is their main source of revenue. And this is why we have districts that they think they have insurance coverage, and they don't. And then the taxpayers are on the hook. But then, of course, they've started all of these different entities. You asked about Mukasey. Mukasey used to be a highly respected financial advisory firm. It was founded by two gentlemen that understood what was going on in school finance, and it's a complicated system. And so if you go back to when they passed Robin Hood and all of these different policies that relates to school funding, it was confusing. It is confusing. It's confusing now. It's an even bigger mess now. But Mukasey used to help provide guidance and services and audits to the education system. Well, what happened in 2019 is we did a whole rewrite of the funding formula, and it was celebrated, and it was yay, it was the greatest thing ever, and really, Texans really believed that this was going to solve the funding problems. Well, at that time, you had Chairman Dan Huberty on the head of the Public Education Committee, and you had a gentleman by the name of Leo Lopez, who was at the TEA. He was the CFO of the TEA. And so this gentleman, he's by all accounts, a wizard with numbers. And there's about 10 people in the state of Texas right now, in fact, I think there might be a couple of them here, that actually understand this funding formula that they wrote and passed in 2019. It was a boondoggle, y'all. It was not what was good for Texas. It was super confusing. You've got allotments, you've got buckets, you've got pennies and copper pennies and silver pennies and purple pennies and all this insanity and golden pennies, and yes, and it'll come out. And so then, these two gentlemen, within a couple years, end up at this firm called Mukasey. And I don't know how somebody that was well, I'm not going to go into his background. I don't understand how someone bought into one of the most respected financial firms of Texas with Charles Butt, billionaire founder of HEB, who funds Raise Your Hand Texas, Holsworth Center, and a whole lot of others, as well as Christopher Huckabee, who is the owner of Huckabee and Associates, the largest architecture firm in Texas, and the third largest in the nation, and that goes into the bond situation. I don't know how, but somehow, according to the Quorum report and a whole lot of other reports, whoa, we have new owners. Well, since then, we've gone from being a financial firm to being not just a financial firm, but we're advertising for bonds, we're advertising for energy, we're advertising for political consulting. So when we talk about TASB, Mukasey, Texas Association of School Administrators, Bexar County Education Coalition, Guadalupe County Education, all of these entities, y'all, they're the same people. They're the same people. And they're just figuring out how do they lobby to pass laws to steer your money from your bank account into theirs. And again, I'll go back to, that's how 60 cents on the dollar has been steered out of our classrooms.
Chairman Bonnet, I want to rope you into this conversation. So from your vantage point at the Capitol, how do these entities, these associations, show up at the legislative process?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and ironically, I don't know if I'm the very best person to answer that, and I'll give you a couple of reasons why. Sometimes on a Friday late afternoon, I'll go by and visit my 92-year-old mother, and we'll sit there at the kitchen table, and she'll talk for about an hour, and then she'll say, Gregory, you haven't said anything. I've been doing all the talking. And that tends to be by nature. I do a lot of listening, not a lot of talking. Another example is in 2021, Monday morning after committee assignments had come out. My wife and I were driving into Austin early in the morning, and I thought, well, I wonder what people are saying about the assignments. And so I called a friend who's not a member of the legislature, and I said, well, what are you hearing? And they said, well, the lobby's kind of freaked out. They're concerned. And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, I was a little offended by that. And he says, well, you're the chair of appropriations, and Dustin, now Speaker Burrows, he's the chair of calendars, and you guys don't talk to anybody. So they were a little alarmed because we don't tend to engage a lot with, with some of the folks that you might be thinking of. So a couple observations. One is that I think that you might be surprised to hear a few things. One is that some of these organizations are not always in sync. And so when you think about TASB, TASB, but also rural school coalitions, small and moderate-sized schools, they actually have different perspectives. And so it's not always the exact same message. And I think that in terms of sometimes what we see in the building, they talk more to the people that kind of like their message. And so if and you would think they'd want to engage with other people from the standpoint of persuasion, but they have more of a tendency to, in my observation, to gravitate toward people that are going to be more affirming of what they're saying. So some of us don't necessarily always hear everything that's going on, but advocacy writ large, like separate and apart from what you guys are talking about, is most effective. And I've said this, to many crowds before, when they talk to their members back home, and then they have people back home contact the person who represents them. Legislators are most responsive and sensitive to the people who they represent, which is the way it's supposed to be. And so sometimes I think that's the most effective way for any organization to operate. And we do see some of that during session where an email blast or a text message, something has gone out, and people back home receive it. Maybe they don't have the whole story, but enough to pique their interest, and then they contact the office to either ask questions or register an opinion. So that tends to be, just from my perspective, where I see the most interaction.
Mr. Hodges, at the school board level, tell me, how do these associations, these entities, show up in your day-to-day governance?
I'm going to answer that, but first off, I'm going to say thank you to my wife, who has been on a long road with us on trying to make education better for kids. I'm married above my pay grade, and I love you. And please give her a round of applause for dealing with a lot of crazy. Also, Dr. Mary Bone is here. She is a great friend of mine, very, very smart lady. I've got Kathy Broughton and Kathy Young, Rachel Walker, and one of our city council members from Midland is also here. So I appreciate y'all being here. And but so let me go into this on TASB as far as like a day-to-day from my perspective, sitting on the school board for a district that has around 29,000 kids, 3,000 employees. We've got a $1.415 billion capital bonds project going on. We've got about a $400 million annual budget. So we're a medium-sized district in West Texas. TASB is not just a folk legend or something you hear about. It's not some theory. For us as trustees, it is a tangible entity that has absolutely negative impact on us being able to manage our organizations independently as we're supposed to be able to do by Texas law and the Texas Constitution back in our hometown. So, and the way that this works is TASB has been around for a long time, and TASs, and I think that they have probably served a purpose, still serve a purpose to some of the smaller communities that cannot afford to have some of the professional staffs needed once you get to a certain size. But every agenda meeting that we're in, every time we talk about policy, every time we talk about insurance, every time we talk, You name it, TASB is there with us. TASB indoctrinates the school board trustees absolutely from the moment that you're elected. I know, because I went to Region 18, another way that we funnel the Texas Education Agency, that's the way that they move their money around through that, but that's a different story. But so I went out to Region 18. As soon as I got there, there was another trustee from a different board, and they tell you 4 points. I said, your job as a trustee is you hire a superintendent, you set a budget, you set the tax rate, and then you pretty much just go with the district, but you've got to handle your maintenance, right? 4 things. Essentially, our maintenance on our M&O side, a tax rate, hire the superintendent, and set the budget. 4 things. Well, they totally do not tell you that that is statutorily incorrect through state law. The Texas Education Code, can't remember what it is. I think it's conveniently have it. It's Texas Education Code subchapter D, and then subsection 11.5151. Boards are a body corporate with exclusive power and duty to manage the district in your local entities. It doesn't say anything about the administration. It doesn't say anything about the superintendent. It doesn't say anything about the associations. It doesn't even say anything about the Texas Education Agency, because a school district trustee is legally defined differently than an elected rep. We are responsible for real property that sits in a trust for those that live and property owners of whatever entity or county that you're in. So TASB comes in and they try and be the subject matter expert on everything. They absolutely use psyops tactics to convince you that you are less than, you are too incompetent, you're just a country rube, and to let the subject matter experts come in. So we deal with it absolutely on a daily basis. We have done our best to eliminate their impact on it. The smartest thing that you can do is to educate your board members and empower them to be their own subject matter experts and to push back. TASB uses the smaller districts as a loss leader to get their claws in the medium-sized districts. The U.S. Census Bureau just came out with a report. There's 22 million people that live within the triangle here, the Golden Texas Triangle, which there's only 18 million registered voters in the 2024 election. So TASB and Moat Casey and all the other grifters that come along with public education are not trying to educate your kids. They're not trying to protect the taxpayers. They are using it all as a loss leader to focus on the Golden Triangle to get in the big districts so they can continue to control the market share. They're absolutely terrible people. Dan Troxel, the leader, the CEO of TASB, should be fired immediately. I'm going to name him. I'm putting people's names to it. Everyone says, don't use people's names. It makes it personal. It is personal. Dan, you're stealing my money and not serving our students. You need to go. You should get fired. You're fired, Dan.
Brandon, let's stay with you for just a moment. So let's unravel this a little bit. Just
Don't
shine
get me started on
Yeah.
Marath. He'll get real mad.
Let's shine a spotlight on. So a new school board member gets elected. They come in. How are they introduced to these groups like TASB or Moat Casey?
You go to for me, I can only speak for myself. I immediately was sent on my own accord. They don't put you on a bus or anything special. You can drive yourself. But I went to the Region 18 Center with TEA, and I sat down with a certified TEA instructor that came in and instructed us and told us what our governing abilities were. Literally in the meeting, as he was telling me these 4 points, fat redneck from Midland pulled up on the old Google box the actual state law, and I asked him, I said, you're missing all these points. I read him the entire subsection code, and I said, it seems like all the powers and authorities are to us duly elected reps, and you're missing all that. And it doesn't even mention the superintendent until way down on the bottom paragraph down here. And with as many lawyers were involved in this, I want to say there was probably a reason that they talked about the trustees first and the superintendent second. I don't know. I'm just a country rube, but I think there's some precedent in this. So they just automatically try and get you convinced that you, as a parent, as a taxpayer, you are too dumb and it is too complicated and too complex to run a school district. And I'm just like, but it's not. It's just not that. We're empowered to do it. I was elected by the constituents that make up District 5. We're an elected republic. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do what's best based on what I think is, or my constituents want and what I think is want. And you can bring in all the crazy educrats and the crazy people in the board meetings and stomp your feet and act like spoiled children. I'm going to vote against you every time. I'm going to fire you, Dan. I'm going to fire you, Dan Troxel. Like, TASB's terrible.
Mandy,
unless you work for them. If you can't get a real job, you can go to work for TASB.
How do you really feel?
Oh, it's just, they're just, I mean, just.
So Mandy, let's
they've
come back to
wasted
you.
so many hours of my time.
Let's unravel this system for a moment. We mentioned Mo Casey. Brandon mentioned Mo Casey. How does this firm influence that local decision-making that goes on, and how do they influence state policy?
Yeah, great question. So back in, I'll start with, we got to go back to 95 when actually it was outgoing Democrat governor, Ann Richards was leaving, and Texas was doing what we were doing. We are the leaders of America. As goes Texas, so going to go America. And we were on the right. We were standing firm for the values that we all in this room support: freedom, family, faith, hard work, personal responsibility, all of the things that made our great country what it is. And the Democrats said, oh no, how are we going to indoctrinate the kids? Oh my gosh. And so they worked together and passed something called the Team of 8 language. Team of 8, in case you don't know what the Team of 8 is, there are 7 elected trustees. There's lots in this room. And then there's that one. Who is that one? It's the superintendent. Okay? And how does the superintendent become the superintendent? Well, whether it's Moat Casey's executive search firm or Welsh and Gallego's executive search firm, or of course TASB's executive search firm, they're all search firm people. And what do? They put these same people, or sometimes they go and get them from California, which is what happened in Midland a few years ago, where they went and got a radical superintendent from Midland.
I was not on the board.
He was not. She came over, they brought her in.
I was not on the board.
All sorts of nonsense. And luckily, the people of Midland were like out. It was 2 years. They were like, nah, we're not doing that. And they sent her over to Fort Worth. You guys have all heard about this lady because she's still collecting your tax dollars because the board there was like, get out, you're terrible too. How did she get there? Search firms. And so what they did with this search firm nonsense and this Team of 8 language, which we have to repeal. We have to repeal the Team of 8 because this
100%.
is what Brandon is saying. They indoctrinate you. And he said he went to Originate Service Center, but here's what they really do if you're not conscious about taxpayer dollars. They go to a 3-day junket to the JW Marriott, and it is real fun. There's a water park there, and then at night you have parties.
No, Midland used to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Okay, but they send you on a really great place, and they indoctrinate you. They tell you you have to go to your superintendent. In fact, if you pick up the phone, someone should try and do it right now, and call TASB and try and speak to someone about something, they'll say, have your superintendent call us. Because they have effectively rigged the system. This is what we're talking about as a cartel. They have made it where those in the leadership, the superintendent is now the conductor of this train, not your local people, your trustees that have a true vested interest in the community and the future. No, they're saying it's the superintendent as opposed to the superintendent serving at the pleasure of the board that is elected by the community. So that is what they have done. So then once they did that and they start doing all of these conferences, y'all, you can go to 4 TASB conferences a year, multiple TASA.
System's
that's
a great
off.
school.
You can go to Systems. It's constant. Every single month there's multiple conferences that you, the taxpayer, can fund for your trustee to go and hear how to do this. The reality is the majority of trustees are able to figure this out. Google is a great thing. You can pull up the laws. Now with AI, you can ask what the laws are. You don't need these entities that are telling you you must do X, Y, and Z. X, Y, and Z, let me be clear, is boys can go in girls' bathrooms. Yes, that came from TASB. Or X, Y, and Z, boys can travel with girls' sports. Yeah, that was guidance too from them. Or at a TASB conference we had, the CFO of Moat Casey stand up in front of not 1, but 2 school board trustee meetings and tell them not to give teacher pay raises because they needed to leverage it if I'm quoting a trustee that was there in the room that said this publicly, to weaponize it for the 89th legislative session. This is much of what is going on, and you're all paying for it.
I want to bolt on TASB. I just wanted, to your point, as the president, no one reached out from TASB at all to me as board president, has not done it to the new board, and the emails that come from TASB go to the superintendent, and she forwards them to us.
Oh, there. See, they don't talk to. That's a good point.
100%.
They don't. They only talk to the
Was
superintendent.
not trying to interrupt. I forget.
Chairman Bonin, let's bring you back to this conversation. So, from your vantage point, you see this up close, firsthand. What's the coordination at hand here between these associations and these consultants at the Capitol?
Well, hopefully this will be some positive news, and that is that my personal experience in working on public education legislation is that it's me and my colleagues sitting in an office or a conference room or in a hearing and working on these things, believe it or not. And we have Representative Terry Lou Wilson sitting right here on the front row, my partner from Galveston County, a former teacher, has played a huge role in education. I see Helen Kerwin, Representative Kerwin here. I think I saw Brad Bailey. He's going to be a great member when he gets sworn in. Believe it or not, we actually work together as colleagues and then with our partners on the Senate side. And that's where a lot of the heavy lifting really gets done. So I don't have a great line of sight into the coordination between, say, these consultants and in the associations. I don't know if they're always even coordinating, because, again, sometimes when you get into the nuance of funding in particular, it can really vary in terms of if you're actually doing objective, data-driven analytical assessment of how this is going to affect different districts, they're not the same. And so what works well for rural Texas may not work so well in the urban areas, and vice versa. So they're not always in sync, but more importantly, it's really, believe it or not, the policymakers that are working together to actually debate and negotiate what happens. And I will tell you, and I think we'll talk about this in a minute, the education reform that was achieved in the last session was tremendous. It was as much as I think I've seen in a decade, and it happened in one calendar year. It was truly an amazingly successful session, and I think that's a testament to first of all, the leadership of Governor Abbott, Lieutenant Governor Patrick, and Speaker Burrows, and then Brad Buckley, God bless him. That guy was working day and night as the chair of Public Education Committee. I know Terry Lou Wilson, they were in hearings until, all night, a time or two, in wee hours of the night. So it was a heavy lift, but in that regard, we actually got a whole lot done last year.
Can I say something? I want to make sure we're being clear about something. So first off, I think there are so many great legislators that Chairman Bonin has named off, including himself, which I don't think that I could ever sing his praises high enough for the appropriation for school choice.
Try it, sing.
But hallelujah, I'm so glad, and I pray to God that he is in this position again because he supports freedom and parents. What we're talking about here when I talk about the cartel and this rigged system, we have so many great leaders at the Capitol. They're in this room right here. Terry Leo Wilson has been doing this for 30-something years, starting at the SBOE fighting. Helen Kerwin jumped in when she was needed. Chairman Bonin is leading the appropriations for this. The reason that we say it's rigged is because it's happening at the local level. This is really important for y'all to understand, especially when we're talking about the bonds and the property tax issues. The great leaders in this room, chairman, representatives, they are doing everything humanly possible and that is legal, constitutional, to give you back your property taxes, to give you relief, to set up a system so that Texans can be free and continue to lead the nation. The point of talking about the profiteers is there is a divide. There's a gap between what is being said at the local level, particularly by these associations, consultants, they're all taxpayer-funded lobbyists, by the way, and what's happening at the Capitol, because at the Capitol, you're trying to pass laws that give freedom. We want local control. We know what's best for our homes. That local control is being exploited and weaponized against Texans in so many different ways. TASB is just one example. They have exploited and weaponized. They passed a law, they rigged it with the team of 8, and they are exploiting and weaponizing this. Our great leaders cannot be at every single school board meeting. They can't be at every single city council meeting. And so when we're talking about this is what's really important. It's arming you all with the information needed to go back into your communities and be able to push back against the lies on the bonds that, oh, you need $150 million track and field stadium, not even a football field, y'all, track and field stadium like Crawley ISD or La Jolla ISD that built a water park. The reality is that there is a gap. And while we have great leaders that are trying to ensure that we are free to pursue the lives that we want and for the economics of our state to continue to lead the free world, that is what I really want to hinge on, because I don't want our great Chairman Bonin up here to think, or any of our leaders. I mean, I'm watching Terry Leo Wilson. She's nodding her head. She knows all of this. So does Helen Kerwin. But this is happening in every single one of our communities, and that is why you have $236 billion in bond debt. That is why 50% of our kids can't read, 60% can't do math, and 70% failed our history exams. That is why there's a war literally right now at the SBOE, which many of you have testified at, including Victoria Hinojosa and so many others in this room. That is why. It's at the local level and partnering with these entities that have figured out a way to create taxpayer-funded lobbying and association organizations. They have them up here in Austin fighting, but then they're in your communities, and that's who's doing it.
I want to say something, because all that is very important. But I'm going to say this, and I appreciate y'all serving our kids and writing legislation, all the legislators in here. I don't think y'all are getting the information. It's not getting upstream to leadership on what we're dealing with at the local leadership level. Let me tell you about TASB. So we had a situation at one of our elementary schools. We know it happened. The kids were abused. I saw it on the video screen, and 2 other board members did. Period. It happened. We saw it. We saw the security videos of this happening. TASB comes in. I self-report to the TEA, because that's what I'm going to do, because my wife knows how crazy I am. You're going to kill me or put me in prison, under the prison, because I'm going to support kids that cannot protect themselves. TASB comes in under the risk management pool and says, sir, as the president of the board, as an elected official, tells me, I'm going to forcefully ask you to recuse yourself from all litigation and any discussion over the possibility of this, because you are in an adversarial position against the district, because you self-reported to the Texas Education Agency, and they sabotaged me. Both lawyers, our school district attorney, the district's attorney, and then our board attorney that we hired, both were, I think they were playing the attorney game, but I just said, I'm going to excuse myself from this meeting and I'll be back. And I came back with my attorneys, and I'm still fighting like hell with them, because they don't have statutory, and this is what the local elected officials and trustees need to know. They do not have, TASB or anybody, any of these grifters, do not have the statutory authority in the Texas Education Code or the Texas Constitution to tell me what I'm going to do. The only people I'm beholden to are the voters that make up District 5 that put me in office. Now, thank you. Now, the mature side of me comes in and says, now I was elected to a body corporate, an entity. So I have a fiduciary responsibility to this entity too, not to cause harm to it. Well, I weigh it out, and I go, okay, as a human being, as a Christian, as someone who knows Jesus, my loyalty is to the 5 kids that couldn't walk, the kids that couldn't talk, the kids that couldn't take care of themselves. And I witnessed absolute abuse in that classroom. And so you can kiss my royal fat overweight butt if you think you're going to tell me what I can and can't do. I will sue you from here to the planet Mars before you do it. And every board member needs to know that, and our elected officials at the state level need to realize we literally have attorneys coming in trying to intimidate people. Now, me, that's catnip. What do I have, Allison? Oppositional defiant disorder, whatever it is. So for me, that's catnip. I'm going, oh man, I came to play, guy. But I want our elected reps to know this is happening on a local level, and kids that literally their entire existence is another human being has to make sure that they're able to live. We have organizations coming in and saying, well, the duty of the elected rep is to this entity, God of Baal, over the other human. Not happening on my, not happening. And reps can, and if reps don't want to deal with it, they can find a new job too.
Chairman Bond, and I want to talk policy for a minute. So Mandy mentioned the practice of taxpayer-funded lobbying. So for those of you who don't know, that is when your tax dollars are weaponized to hire contract lobbyists who then turn around and go to our state capitol and really advocate against our interests. One example of that is, TASB. TASB's, school districts pay those dues using your tax dollars, and so does TML, the Texas Municipal League. And if you look at their advocacy agendas, TASB and TML, you'll find policy reforms and policy priorities that really go against the taxpayer. Things such as they're against uniform election dates for bonds. They're against bond approval thresholds. They want to make it easier for these bonds to pass, these $2-3 billion bonds. And so, Chairman Bonin, can you think of just reforms from the past legislative sessions where these groups, these associations showed up and were in strong opposition to those reforms?
So let's talk about some of the things we have gotten done that were opposed, just to put it politely. So first of all, the thing that would obviously come to mind would be school choice. That was a multi-decade effort. And, I showed up in 2013, and I still recall as a freshman, we would have an amendment on the budget, ironically, that was essentially a proxy vote for whether or not you supported school choice. As a practical matter, nothing really in the end came of it. And, it was not the easiest thing your first term, and it was not the high-profile issue at that time that it is today. And I said, I just think this is the right thing. And so I voted accordingly and have been doing so ever since. And I've been outnumbered ever since until last year, in which case we managed to get that across the finish line. But with a lot of opposition. And as you guys are aware, the first class of students is being registered now or processed in the application process. And we have been told for years, well, this is just so rich people can send their kids to private school. And turns out, it looks like that first cohort is going to be entirely special needs kids and low-income kids, just as we had predicted that it would be. So that was a huge win. I think the Blue Bonnet curriculum is another massive win for the state and, of course, especially for the children. There was a lot of, reluctance, if you will, to that. The teacher incentive allotment, that wasn't this past session, that was a prior session. And in the beginning, there was, again, a lot of opposition, and it was really ironic to me because it's an optional program. The state covers the cost entirely. We're rewarding experience and performance and excellence, and yet in the first year or two, I had individuals asking if we would get rid of that. And my response was, well, wait a minute, isn't it an optional program? And they'd say, yeah. And so, well, doesn't the state bear the entire cost of that? And they'd say, yes. And so, well, no, we're not going to get rid of that. It has now taken off, and I think part of it is because it's been very successful. Teachers are actually sticking around longer. And think about this for a minute. And again, my colleague, Terry Lou Wilson, because she taught for decades, knows you can have two teachers in the same school, on the same hall, and one of them, as soon as the last bell rings, is out in the parking lot. The other one is there for another 3 hours, meeting with other teachers and students and grading papers, and they're getting paid the same thing. Well, that's not okay, and that's actually bad for morale. And I'm not saying that was happening at every place in every district. We actually have some really good school districts back home. We're very blessed in Galveston County. But this allows people to, number one, see that they're valued and appreciated as a teaching profession. If you want quality teachers, you do need to pay them. By the way, this was part of the issue that we had about the money not always getting to the classroom, and we learned that the hard way. One of the complaints about the large increase in funding that we did last year was that we told the districts precisely, in many instances, what they had to do with that money, and the reason was, otherwise, it wouldn't get into the classroom. And then, I hesitate to say this, but I will. The last time I recall we did a substantial teacher pay raise, they hired more teachers. Well, that's paying teachers more money, but it's not paying the teachers themselves more money. So we had to make it clear, no, we expect that teacher pay will actually go up for the individual teacher. That was kind of the point. So those are just some examples of victories that we've had that are, I think, really positive reforms that are going to have a really positive impact on our kids and on the future of the state of Texas. And by the way, it happens outside of education too, where a lot of the time we tackle a difficult issue. We're told the sky is going to fall. I still remember it was open carry, I think, that, oh man, there are going to be shootouts at every intersection. No, that didn't happen. And I could cite any number of other examples where sometimes the anxiety over what we're doing is much greater. And so it's much better if you actually do it, because once you've done it, then you get to prove out the value and, the benefit of that policy. If you try it and it doesn't pass, then they still get to tackle the straw man, and you don't have the definitive proof that, no, see, we did it, and it's okay. There are no monsters under the bed. It's all right. You can turn the lights back out. Everything's going to be fine.
So, Mandy, let's stay in the policy realm. I mentioned earlier the TASB and the TML, legislative priorities agenda. And a lot of the opposition you see is on issues like property tax reform, spending limitations, bond transparency. In fact, I'm reminded of my colleague John Bonura. So last session, during special session number 2, Governor Greg Abbott put on the call a limit on local spending. That bill, when it was heard in committee during special session number 2, garnered 52 people registered on the bill. There were 51 there against the bill. And only my colleague John Bonura signed up for the bill. These folks it was your lobbyists, your cities, your counties. Mandy, why do they oppose these reforms so much?
It's fun to be Santa Claus. Look, you can break it down to that. We just had Easter. It's the Easter Bunny. And it's fun to give people things. I like giving gifts, right? Y'all, this is what they're doing, except they're not doing it themselves. They like to take tax dollars and then they can go out and say, but look what we're giving you. But this ties into all of the problems with taxpayer-funded lobbying, because when we talk about taxpayer-funded lobbyists, I want to be clear. Taxpayer-funded lobbyists are not just representing school boards or local municipalities or anything like that. That's not how this is. There's thousands of them. They live right here in Austin, Texas. Many of them are former legislators or ledge staffers, and they know the laws in and out. They know where they were tweaked. They know where there's little ways to get around things. You can go look at the 313 abatement program that was completely exploited by leadership, the superintendent in Barbers Hill, ISD. And you can see they go out and they sell these secrets. They sell where the bill was tweaked, where a comma was moved, and where a sentence was added, whether it was in this house or that house or in the conference committee, which no one pays attention to. I mean, this is what happens, and what they're just doing is they're figuring out a way. It's like that, I call it hide the banana, but y'all know that game of cups where you're trying to figure out where it is, like under what cup is it? This is what the game is, and that's why I say the system is rigged, and it's by taxpayer-funded lobbyists who are also on the dole of the profiteers. The profiteers are these people that are being paid by your tax dollars. And I really do go hard in the paint against like the largest ones. You're hearing me talk about the Moat Casey's, but to be clear, there are tons of them. I'm looking at Roscoe ISD. I don't know if anybody's here has Roscoe ISD. Y'all, they spent like $90 million on virtual ed. It's insane. There's a couple thousand kids there for Stride K-12. And if you Google, it was Stride. Now it's K-12 because they were terrible. And we're paying this. If I was a teacher in Roscoe ISD, I hope somebody sees this, I would revolt because this is bonkers. But these are just profiteers. Or we go to those that are passing the bonds. Y'all, we did in-depth research. It is out now. I've been sitting on it for a couple years because it was so explosive. But what we found is the very people who are planning the bonds, and I'm going to give you an example. I'm going to name names so you don't think I'm making this up. The Milders, who started Friends of Texas Public School. While you're driving down the highway today, look up. There's great things happening in public schools. There are great things happening in public schools. But let me tell you what it's not. It's not people that charge your school district $50,000 to come in and have a pep rally. That's what Leslie Milder does. Yay, rah, rah, Friends of Texas Public Schools. And husband Scott Milder, you may recognize that name. He ran against Dan Patrick in 2018. He's busy. I don't think he sleeps. He must be a vampire or something because he is the principal salesman at VLK Architects. That's one of the top architects in the country. They're here in Texas, by the way, but in the country and here in Texas. And so he's their chief executive something for K through 12. His side hustle, him and his wife also have Friends Consulting Groups. Anybody here from Prosper? Y'all know who planned your massive $2 billion bond a couple years ago? That would be the Milders, okay? Now, then what happens? So they go in and they buy everybody dinner and they talk about how beautiful it can be. Who wants a $100 million football stadium? I do. Being Santa Claus is fun. And so they sell them on that, and then they say, and we'll do one better. We'll start a political action committee. We'll start a political action committee, and then we'll go get the profiteers, those architects, engineering, construction firms, because they just love to support the community because it's always for the kids, it's Friends for the kids, or it's Prosper for the kids, or 40 for the kids, or Drippings for the kids, or whatever. It's always for the kids. You can go look on Transparency USA. It's all there. And the entities, the profiteers that spend as little as $500, sometimes it goes up to a couple thousand, within 2 years, just 2 years of the life of bond spending for billions of dollars, for every dollar they invest, they are receiving upwards of $16,000 in return in just 2 years. That is your money. And they're going, but the community voted on it. That's a lie. We went and found that the average participation in these bonds, especially if they're May bonds, y'all, there's a lot coming up. Be paying attention. Yes, yes. These bonds are passing with anywhere between 2 and 7% of the vote. This is why the governor says we need a supermajority, and they're taking place in precincts that are next to the schools, and the teachers are encouraged. And if you don't believe me, go look at Brian Woods, that now runs the Texas Association of School Administrators. He was at Northside ISD until he got caught electioneering on $1 billion bond, telling teachers they're not just going to get paid raises, they might get pay decreases. Where did this information come from? Well, Raise Your Hand Texas. Raise Your Hand Texas put out a document that year telling all of these ISDs, you can track your teachers. You can track your teacher's address to see who has gone and voted, and then you can email them and you can threaten them. And by golly, that's exactly what they did. So when we talk about a rigged system at the local level, that is who is doing it. And by the way, they put up candidates. If you don't believe me, go ask Terry Leo Wilson. They then go find candidates to run against principled conservatives that say we can have a thriving economy. We can be the 8th or 7th largest economy in the nation. We can do that. And we don't have to spend our taxpayers into oblivion. So there you go. Sorry. I know that was long-winded, but I felt like we needed to talk about the whole cycle.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Me?
Do you just say kids or puppies too?
Y'all, I know I don't believe this. I love them both, but I think everybody needs to learn discipline as they're growing up. But I send my kid to a public school.
It's not what I heard. As someone who failed the TASB exam, but I did see the curriculum, all I heard was you hate kids. That's all I heard.
So I've been told worse things.
We're about to turn it over to Q&A, but before we do that, I have a final question because I want to talk about solutions, and I'm going to pose that question to Chairman Bonin. So start prepping those questions. Chairman, there was a bill last session, House Bill 5019. It was dubbed the TASB killer. It really got at just all the tentacles that TASB has. And so I want you to talk about what that effort might look like next session. What does a version of that bill look like in the 90th?
Yeah, when I think about that, I kind of laugh a little bit because I've got 149 colleagues in the House, 31 senators, governor, lieutenant governor, speaker. They'll have a little input as to what this looks like. It's kind of hard for me to just sit here and say. But when I look back at last session, seems like 10 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. And I think the legislation you're referring to specifically, as you point out, had a lot of components to it. And so two things. Number one, we haven't even begun to mention all the stuff we did last session. I didn't even mention the cell phone ban. That's another huge win that we had. And by the way, privately, there were some districts publicly that were out front on that, and then others were telling us we'd really like to do that, but we'd really like it if you would do that for us. And so we took care of that. But where I'm going with this is, I do think there was, number one, a bandwidth issue. Like you can really only do so much per unit time, and then you're depleted for that window. So I do think that there was a question of bandwidth with respect to a piece of legislation that was that comprehensive. And then the second thing would be, because it did have a lot of different elements to it, and sometimes complex omnibus bills are good. But sometimes providing focus is better. And it also can be a little more strategic in that if a bill has too many moving parts, it's really easy for the opposition to then shine the spotlight on deficiencies or criticisms or complaints and not even talk about the central key elements that you really wanted to have a conversation about. And so it might be strategic to think about, if you want to do a comprehensive bill, that's fine, but let's have some bills where we just tackle individual concerns. And so that way you don't take the whole effort down, if you will, because you were trying to do so much at one time. So if I think tactically about it, that's how I would think about it. And that way, when you're having a conversation about a specific topic, you can stay on topic. And you don't lay the bill out, and then they're talking about everything except the main focus of the bill that you had really wanted to have the debate about.
Excellent. And with that, we're going to turn it over to questions. I see one up here. Hold on one second.
Oh, you don't need it.
You have online listeners that didn't go hear it.
Oh,
Yes.
Run, Ben.
Go ahead. There you go. Okay. So, I fed at the trough for 22 years. School districts and the military were our big paycheck. My personal expense allotment was $100,000 a year, back when $100,000 was worth about $250,000. My job was to tell them what they needed, tell them what to do. I'm an engineer, and that was it. And I was an influencer. That was part of what I did. Now, on the other side, talking about bonds, multi-generational indebtedness is something that wasn't mentioned up there on the dais. Please talk for a moment about our children and our children's children living with our mistakes.
So you're saying I can blame you for all this? I'm just kidding. I'm joking. I'm just kidding. Right. No, I'm joking. The explosion, the rigged system has really taken place, I would say, in the past 10 to 15 years. They figured it out. So I want to say that, look, the reason the bond system is set up is because we understand that there needs to be facilities. But to your point, and you actually, it was interesting, you talked about building for school districts and for defense. You said, okay, so fun fact, Huckabee, again, the largest construction firm or third largest, I don't know, it depends on where they're bragging into who. But, you know, they're at all the TASB conferences and they're trying to build all these things. They were acquired a few years ago by a private equity firm called Godspeed Capital. Yeah. And Godspeed Capital used to invest in defense all right, at the federal level. But then once they started clamping down and being like, y'all, we don't need $10,000 bullets and $35,000 toilet seats like we're being charged for, there is a whole new private equity market called AEC, Architecture, Engineering, and Construction. And you know where they're all coming? Here. Because y'all are the golden goose that keeps on giving. Our bonds are backed by the 8th largest economy in the world. They're AAA rated. It's awesome. So they're here, and this is where the sales aspect. I talked about Scott Malder, but let me be clear. They're in all of your communities. And they come in, and they buy dinner, and they sell this beautiful vision, and they use these coercive tactics and or marketing tactics to tell you, do you want the good kids to come to your schools? Well, then you better build a $100 million football stadium. Or do you want the good kids here? I mean, this is what they're doing. Then we better do this. And it has nothing to do with the curriculum in the classrooms or high-quality teachers. So what happened was this is the exploitation of our desire to have local control. And they come in and they send these people in, they can hire them, but again, this stupid ambassador program that most districts are paying into at Friends of Texas Public Schools that brings in this clown show of good things are I mean, we all know good things are happening, and better things would be happening if we weren't focused on 13 nights of football and $100 million football stadiums that kids are going to pay for. And I heard the lieutenant governor talking about the fact, and anybody that watched Charlie Kirk talk about the fact, that this next generation that's coming up, y'all, they don't want to get married. They don't want to have kids because they don't feel like they have a future and they can't buy a house. They're terrified. They are terrified because we are saddling them at every level of government, to be clear. I mean, our federal government's not doing any better. They're saddling them with a debt that is so stomach churning that they are completely foregoing the American dream. They do not understand the foundations, which was hard work and fiscal responsibility. Our state, we got our house in order. 8th largest, are we 8th or 7th? 8th or 7th? Okay, 8th largest economy. We are, as Dan Patrick said, a nation state. This is amazing. But at your local level, there is electioneering occurring, there is lying occurring, and there is a rigged system set up to tell you if you don't build the latest and greatest facility, then somehow you're not going to have kids in your schools. And we're watching it right now in Dallas ISD, trying to pass a $4 or $6 billion bond. Give kids a great education. Oh, as a parent, I got littles right now. I just want to know that they are going to grow up with a great education, not being indoctrinated, and be able to enjoy the freedoms that our forefathers fought for. But if we saddle them with that, they won't have it.
I want to bolt on to something he said, because there's a very simple solution to this. We were talking about solutions earlier, and there's, in my opinion, 4 of them. But the first and one of the most important ones on the INS side is, so the permanent school fund is, so we tell the SBOE, we elect SBOE members and put pressure on them to say, stop raising the backing of it. So the school permanent fund is the one that backs all the INS debt. We continue to raise it. We're at $148, $150 million. That is artificially screwing with your market. Because if you really have a need in your district, you are going to be much more judicious on what you put into your bond planning, because you're going to have to pay more for the interest when it's not artificially backed up by the state and the state legislature and the Senate and the governor and everyone else on it. So one, that's the way to fix it, is stop funding wants and not needs. Secondly, if you were with the defense, so I'm sure you're familiar with the federal regulations with project management and contract management. In the state of Texas, all of our state agencies are required to have a Texas certified contract manager or project manager through the, who's our tax lady? What's the comptroller's office, right? The carve out is for public education. So we hire all these grifters and all these people that can't make it in the private sector. 90% of all their profitable revenue comes from government projects, and they don't have anyone overseeing them. But the Department of Health and Human Services does. Everyone at the state has it, the Ag Commission, but they carved it out and said, Y'all don't have to have this. You can manage your own projects. You have access to artificially low capital rates to go out and sell it to your community. And so then you just run a psyops and a psychological. I mean, I'm not a neurosurgeon, right? But I did end up at UPenn studying psychology. So it's nothing but a grift. You're essentially giving people this unbelievable amount of influence to get them to vote in the negative of their interest long term. So secondly, from a state level, we come in and go, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. So if you're going to come in, and we have the 5th, 6th largest bond in the state of Texas in Midland, and I just dealt with an email driving up here yesterday where we're having all kinds of issues, but there's no overseers on it. So you say what's good for the goose is good for the gander. If you're going to have government contracts for public education, you either have to have CTCMs and CTCPs, or we get rid of them because it causes a bureaucratic mess. But it's all about equitability, right? I just want to be equitable to everyone. So we're either going to all play by the same rules, or we're not going to play by the same rules. The third one is we need consequences. We need to start throwing people in prison. So we investigate them, we arrest them, we indict them, we try them, and if they're found guilty by jury or their peers, we sentence them to prison. I don't care if I went to church with them. I don't care if my kids play baseball with them. If you steal our money and do not serve your students, you're going to prison. So that's the third. There's got to be consequences for the legislation. And then the fourth one is you come in and you educate and empower your school board members. I don't have all the answers. Good Lord, I can barely tie my shoes. That's why I wear boots most of the time. Rachel Walker is extremely, extremely intelligent on education. Her and I argue about all kinds of things, but we're pretty, for the most part, on the same on education. Mary Bone and I argue. We'll all argue. But in order to save Texas and continue to be the 7th or 8th largest economy on planet Earth, we're going to have to educate our kids. And I am so grateful that y'all got vouchers passed. Thank you for passing them. But there's 100,000, 200,000 kids in it. That's a start, but we got 11 million students, right? And so we have to make this a national Texan priority, or we are going to absolutely get dominated by the other states. That's all.
Get the elections on a schedule so that they can't get only teachers to vote.
Questions?
Agreed.
So thank you all for your service. As you may know, the SBOE has taken a seismic shift conservatively that 4 of us will take office in, I believe, January. So
you're gonna stop. You're gonna stop raising the debt ceiling then.
My question is, from each one of your opinions, how can the SBOE assist in this? Not every matter that y'all talked about, but specifically bonds or anything here. How can we do that in our position?
Stop artificially manipulating the market.
Okay, just for the record, I'm not on there. Okay, everybody. So yes.
But you asked. I just said stop
That's
artificially.
wonderful. I'd like to hear from the other two.
Yeah, it's an excellent question, and especially as we start anticipating the next legislative session. So being in session 5 months every other year, the work doesn't really end, but we have seasons. And so we're entering into a season where it's appropriate to start doing your due diligence and your study and your background work to lay the foundation for the policies that you want to pursue in the upcoming session. And that can be anything from education policy to finance to governance. Senator Taylor and I collaborated on restructuring the governance over the PSF, which actually has ended up really working out well. And the endowment is performing much better than it did before. So that segues right into what is the jurisdiction of the SBOE. And so my suggestion is that, hey, we should visit because I'm still in the phases, personally, of thinking about the specific things that I'm going to work on. There'll be things that come up that we can't anticipate between now and then. But now is the time to begin that type of communication where we start to collaborate on, okay, what are going to be the top items? What are the things that we want to show up prepared? Because I will also share this with you. It's hard to do things on the fly. Once we get into session, things happen very quickly. And sometimes, yes, we're reacting and responding, and things can still get done. But the best work usually is work that has happened over a period of time. And either in the interim, you did the hard work, the heavy lifting to be prepared, have well thought out, well-crafted legislation, or it's a multi-session effort. It's something that was rolled out before. It was, analyzed, debated, had some holes punched in it. You come back, you have a better version of it. You also have a heightened sense of awareness with your colleagues. They've already been educated on the topic. You get more momentum behind it, and maybe the second or third time you get it passed. So from my perspective, I don't have a specific ask per se, other than it's probably time to start the conversation about what next spring is going to look like.
So, yeah, I would say you are the voice of millions of Texans, and right now what we're watching is a concerted effort by leftists. I talk a lot about the Red-Green Alliance. Over the past 20 years, and Terry Leo Wilson can confirm this, people really didn't pay attention to the SBOE. There's a lot of people that didn't know it existed. They don't know what it does. They don't know what their responsibility is. And that has been to the detriment of tens of millions of children. And we're watching this play out on our college campuses and our society in general. And what we have done as Americans, that with our underlying foundation in Judeo-Christian principles, is we believe in freedom, and we believe that you come to your beliefs of your own volition. And we also believe that there is a right for everyone to speak their mind, First Amendment rights and whatnot. But in that belief, we have abdicated our responsibility to ensure that those who are putting content in front of our children, that it is factual, and that it aligns with the values that built Western civilization. Shame on us. But there's no time like the present to get it right. And this is so, so important. There is only about 6 large textbook and content publishers right now. There's other little ones, and they try and do stupid things like boxing for girls, and I can explain that. Dr. Young talked about that on a podcast. But y'all, they've all been pulled to the left, and our SBOE was pulled to the left because they're lobbied. They're lobbied while we were fighting at the legislature for X, Y, and Z. We did not pay attention to what was going on. And so what has gone on is we have adopted radical curriculum. I'm not talking about, oh, Mandy, you're a conservative, so it doesn't, this. I'm talking radical curriculum that promotes the ideals of Marxism. All of it's tied to Marxism. Let's be clear. When we're talking about the identity politics that we are seeing right now, intersectionality, its root is Marxism. Anybody that's dealt with cancer understands that if you get breast cancer and it metastasizes, if you have Marxism and it grows into gender theory or queer theory or race theory or this critical theory, it's all the same thing. And this has made its way into every single book. I'm talking first graders in Austin ISD right now reading My Shadow is Purple. That is a transgender ideology book. It is everywhere. So I commend Chairman Kinsey and those conservatives that are on the board right now that are saying we will not capitulate to the whiners and the radicals that are showing up. Western civilization was built on Judeo-Christian values, from our standards of morality to our system of government to our legal system, and we must educate our kids. And no one, not the founders and not any in this room, is saying that you must proselytize. But you absolutely have to understand the underlying foundation that made America the greatest, most benevolent nation, that have lifted more people out of poverty and that has protected the free world going back to the First World War. And if we do not teach our kids this, if we allow another generation of kids to go through our education system and they do not know America, our true history and the roots that we are grounded in, they will not love America, and they will not fight to protect America, and we will not perpetuate the values we have now. So what do I say to those that I hope end up on the board? Fight back. Tell the truth. There is nothing better then shining a light, and I don't care whose feelings it hurts, I don't care who's mad, and I don't care how many times I'm called mean or that I like to kill puppies. Whatever crazy nonsense they say, you fight back and you say the truth. Because when we say the truth, when we teach the next generation and we course correct this absolute bananas insanity that we're watching play out with kids protesting for Hamas one day and transgender ideology the next, they're just like shape-shifting. That is when we will ensure that America remains the leader of the free world and that we will be able to celebrate our 300th anniversary in 50 years.
Amen.
That brings a conclusion to our Q&A and our panel discussion. Please give another round of applause to all our panelists.